That moves forward.
Thank
To
you.
Conference Committee. All right, Conservation Corps, item 10, also split vote, 1, 2, and no vote needed on 3. All right, let's, who's on? Welcome. Who's speaking for the Conservation Corps? Who's speaking for the proposal? Welcome.
Thank you. David Meraki, Director of the CCC. The May revision includes 3 requests from the CCC. The first is a request for funding both in fiscal year 15-16 and 16-17 for the CCC to really pay the costs that are required by the Department of General Services to find facilities for residential centers in locations where the CCC currently does not have these residential centers. These are areas where there's a high need for resource conservation work, but there's a smaller recruitment base, so it really can't be served well by a non-residential center. It includes mostly rural areas, but also some really high-cost urban areas. It also includes areas that are underserved entirely by the CCC because we have no center proximal to that area. And basically, the overall goal is to basically do our due diligence so we can find facilities that can really reduce the costs of opening these residential centers, can really expedite the occupancy of these facilities, and it would provide the CCC with the infrastructure it needs to serve the state and operate the core program as it's intended. These residential centers really enable the Corps to respond more quickly and effectively to disasters. It opens up work opportunities for young people, more young people, particularly those from unstable home environments, foster children, young people from high-intensity gang communities, and it provides a lot more structured time. The Corps program includes every day is a long day. It includes work, it includes academic instruction, job training, physical training, and the residential center really helps to, it's really the venue for the best venue for CCC. And then one other advantage of residential is that many of our centers have center-specific training opportunities for Corps members, so if they can transfer from center to center, they have access to a lot greater number of training opportunities. For example, some of our centers have wildland fire fighting crews, some have water efficiency crews, some have energy conservation crews, and so if a young person can transfer from center to center, they can take advantage of all those training opportunities. So that is our first request. The second request is $5 million for forest health-related projects. This would basically expand what the CCC is currently doing with crews that are doing fuel reduction, and these are crews that are based out of mobile military-style tent camps. So we move these crews every 6 months from high priority area, high risk area to another. These tent camps really allow us to minimize capital costs and really get the crews up and running and get them right to the project locations, minimize our commute time, maximize the productive part of the workday. So that is the second request. The third request we've already discussed, which is the reopening of the Magalia Center.
It's in the Conference Committee. We already dispensed with that. All right, further comment, LAO?
Thank you, Madam Chair. James Hacker, LAO. On item 1, the site search and selection funds, we would concur with staff and recommend approving the $200,000 in 2015-16, but would recommend rejecting the $700,000 in 2016-17, largely because the Corps hasn't provided a detailed proposal for a statement of need or the proposed expenditure of those plans. And additionally, we would note that as the funds aren't needed until 2016-17, there's no reason they couldn't come back with a more detailed request in January without interrupting the activities proposed in 2015-16. On item 2, we would defer to your staff analysis.
All right. Further comment?
I just want to add that I agree that the Corps needs to provide a bigger picture, more comprehensive picture of the residential rebuilding plan, but that the provision of the funding for both years, we're hoping really helps to create some scale economies where we can we could identify more sites because we can plan on doing this for 2 years. We can work with the Department of General Services, Department of Finance, and we'd have, it wouldn't be something we'd have to start and then restart. So that would be our preference, to be able to at least have the opportunity to provide the bigger picture and make the case that there is a rationale for that $700,000 in 16-17.
Good, and we look forward to that proposal. Comments?
Will Shops from the Department of Finance. Just a couple quick comments on item 2. We do think the Forest Health Program is appropriate for a greenhouse gas reduction fund. These activities do lead to GHG reductions. Further, with the actions the subcommittee has previously taken on SRA, we are looking at eating into that SRA fund balance, notwithstanding any outstanding collections that are coming in. But we were projecting about $36 million at the end of 15-16 for SRA. The $10 million's now brought that down to $26 million. That's ongoing, so there's not a lot of SRA money after that for additional expenditures.
Okay, thank you. All right, further comments? No? All right, the first item is to approve as proposed, that is the $200,000 with supplemental reporting language requiring the CCC to include in its January 10th proposal an evaluation of the appropriate number of permanent facilities, including analysis, residential facilities, and including analysis of other methods of program delivery, such as non-permanent camps and co-located residential facilities with community colleges. Is there a motion?
A comment and a motion, and this is for item number 1, correct?
Item number 1.
Yeah, I look forward to that full presentation and review. The challenge was the May revise and not having adequate time. I think all 3 of us are big fans of the CCC, and I'm glad to work with you and them on that project. So I'll make a motion to support item number 1.
All right, further discussion? Public comment? All right, please call the roll.
Senator Wolk?
Aye.
Senator Nielsen? Aye. Senator Pavley?
Aye.
All right, that's 3-0, and that is approved. Item number 2 is to approve as proposed, but we shift the funds from the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund to the SRA funds. Is there a motion?
So move.
All right, it's been moved. Please call the roll.
Senator Wolk?
Aye.
Senator Nielsen? No. Senator Pavley?
Aye.
All right, that is approved, 2-1. And item 3 has been dispensed with already, goes to conference. Thank you. All right. We are now moving to the Department of Conservation, the underground injection program. All right. Okay, welcome. Who's on? You're on. Welcome.
Okay, good morning. I wanted to ask you, how do you want to, there's 2 items. Do you want to handle them sequentially, or do you want to do it all together?
Let's do it all together because we will be splitting up the agenda for recommendation 1, 2, 3, and 5, and then separate out 4.
I have a long statement whenever.
And Senator Pavley, would you like to go first, my dear?
I don't know, maybe they can, it could help frame the discussion and they could answer things. It sort of relates to both items.
Go ahead.
But I thought it was appropriate because I'm in
Yes.
year 4 of this discussion, all starting back on January 2011 with the then director, Elena Miller. Just a simple question about fracking. Where are we fracking wells? How much water is being used? Where are they located? What chemicals are being used? And the response back in the letter that I've saved was, we don't know, we don't keep track. There is no database, that we don't keep track of this. And they said, you know, but they do have a UIC program that they are engaged in keeping track of. But I wanted to spend, with the chair's permission, just a few minutes walking through some history and then really framing the discussion from the chair of the Natural Resources and Water Committee's point of view. I don't chair the Energy Committee, I chair the Water Committee, and our 4-year record drought. This is a big issue, and can we do better? Working with Dogger and the administration on this is yet to be seen. So just a little bit of history. Starting in 2010, Dogger received 15 positions and having to do with regulation and maintenance of oil and gas productions. Then in fiscal year 2010 and 2011, in the May revise, the BCP, May revise BCP, I want to point out, this is a problem, not just with Dogger, but a lot of agencies, they wait till May when it should have been January, right? So in 2010 and 11, the May revised BCP asked for 17 PYs, 3.1 million upfront and 2.7 million ongoing for the UIC program, 2010, 2011. The BCP clearly called for updating UIC regulations, not done. Budget control language noted that funds could be also spent on fracking, not done. The uncodified section of the resources budget trailer bill from that same year, that was Senate Bill 855, required annual reporting on UIC actions for 5 years. The first report was filed. The last 4 years, none, despite the promise of just a month or two ago when you had the hearing, not only from Director Nekadem, but also Secretary Laird, that report would be submitted. We haven't seen it. So promises not kept. Fiscal year 2011, 2012, spring finance letter, note spring, not January, they asked for 36 PYs, 30 permanent, 6 limited term, 4.7 million upfront, 4.4 million ongoing to improve environmental compliance in the underground injection control and construction site review. The legislature approved half the amount of positions that were requested, 18 positions at 2.3 million. And according to our records, that gave them a total overall of 170.9 authorized positions, and about 138 were filled as of July 1st, 2011. Going into fiscal year 2012 and 2013, a January budget, good, budget change proposal asked for 18 PYs, all permanent, 2.5 million upfront and 2.3 million ongoing to enhance onshore and offshore regulatory programs of Dogger by improving its construction site review, environmental compliance, and UIC programs, and strengthening the division support staff. According to Dogger, this was intended to fix the problems of the last 25 years and to provide sufficient support staff levels, including IT staff, to maintain and modernize Dogger's information systems to meet the 21st century electronic needs. The legislature approved it. Director Nekadem assured the legislature he had what he needed. Fiscal year 2013, 2014, no UIC requests. And I would state to you, they probably knew from the EPA that there were questions and problems with identifying whether the underground injection wells were in non-exempt aquifers, particularly down in the Kern County area. Fiscal year 2013, 2014, Dogger now has 194 authorized positions. About 176 of those vacancy slots were filled. Fiscal year 2014 and 2015, a January budget change proposal asked for 65 PYs, 60 permanent, 5 limited term, 13 million upfront, 9.3 million ongoing for the purpose of SB4 implementation. That was the fracking bill. They had to start really from square one on that. They did get that website up and running in a timely manner where the public now knew for the first time where they were fracking. There was notice given to adjacent property owners, what chemicals were being used. So that was completed successfully. Also, though, as part of SB4, the State Water Board for the first time was directly engaged, and I see Mr. Bishop here today from the State Board. The State Board received in 2014 to monitor the water quality impacts on the oil production in parts of California. State Water Board received 14 PYs, 6.2 million upfront, 9.4 million ongoing. The Air Resources Board got 6 PYs and $1.3 million upfront and ongoing, all related to SB4 implementation. From my perspective, these memorandums of agreement have served the State Water Board and Air Board well, and they seem to be doing their job. 2015-2016, the pending budget, January budget change proposal, reauthorization of $1.5 million for IT unspent on SB4 implementation. The spring finance letter asked for 23 additional PYs and $3.5 million for some data management. Also, the State Water Board asked for 19 PYs, $2.9 million for UIC. Dogger, by our math count, has 244.9 authorized positions. We don't have the statistics to show how many were actually filled. The summary is Dogger has received authorization for 53 positions, over $7 million in ongoing funding for UIC-related programs, including data management. They received money for SB4 implementation, that's fracking and acid stimulation, added another 65 positions and over $9 million ongoing. Dogger has failed to supply required reporting to the legislature on the UIC program for the last 4 years. The commitment was for the last 5 years. We only saw one. And I wanted to point out on April 30th this year, a bill that was signed into law that required a spreadsheet to be filled out so we knew how much water was being used in all oil operations, where did the water come from, and how it was disposed of. It was due April 30th. We find out the day it was due or the day after it was due, they haven't done it. It's not there, the information is not successful. So Dogger will argue that it can't meet the deadlines it agreed to with the US EPA and water boards. And we're talking about the 2,500 wells that may be in non-exempt areas where we have injection wells too close to them. These deadlines are now in part reflected in the emergency regulations. And I wanted to just share with you, and I think you can hear my growing concern. We can't trade our energy policy for protecting our water supply. And the priorities in Dogger, I don't think, allow us to provide that necessary oversight. We all have a shared responsibility, but it's not just Dogger, and it's not just this committee and the Water Committee. That's been part of the frustration. The Secretary of Resources needs more engagement. The governor does. We need the water boards. They're doing a good job, and they continue to do it, and we need to fund them more, frankly, to make sure we protect our water supplies. I'm concerned about Board of Supervisors continuing to offer, well permits without really looking at where the groundwater basins are. They have maps, I assume. We've had 4 formal hearings, lots of letter exchanges, formal letters, lots of meetings, lots of phone calls, and the list goes on. Dogger received 50 PYs and $7 million in annual funding, primarily for UIC for the last 5 years. Dogger's existing personnel have identified over 2,500 wells, and now, according to Monday's paper, I find out what I need to know by reading the paper, an additional 3,600 wells have been identified that need to be further reviewed by the water boards because they may be too near our non-exempt aquifers, possibly endangering our dwindling water supply. The legislature does not have this information because Dogger has failed to provide the lengthy required report to the legislature. I mentioned that for the 3rd time. And Director Nekadem and Secretary Laird promised us that those reports would be here. The title of the hearing on March 10th was Ensuring Groundwater Protection, Is the Underground Injection Control Program Working or Not? And I would say so far, the jury is out. It would probably be in the not. So I have a great deal of concern on how we move forward. I will be supporting the staff recommendations, which are thoughtful. I don't think this committee has to choose between an energy policy versus not protecting, I think, our most important natural resource, and that's water, especially in the 4-year of record drought. The recommendations on page 12 and 13, I think, are right on. An audit is essential to review funding and programs for the UIC program. We need to codify the water board's veto power. they already have it, over any activities that impact water quality, especially with the drought, and allow the Department of Fish and Wildlife access to the open pits and ponds, where we're one of the few states that allow that to even occur. So we have problems. I want to be part of the solution. I know Dogger wants to be part of the solution, but I think there's just sort of this culture that we've had that Dogger historically has been a permitting agency and not a regulatory agency. And times have changed. The EPA is engaged now. The public is watching. And so this is an important issue, and thank you for allowing me to make a statement.
Fran, thank you for your ongoing and continuing commitment and energy on this issue and your advocacy for the public and for our water supply. Senator Nielsen?
Madam Chair, and I'm fully respectful of the criticisms of the dragging of heels that Senator Pavley has mentioned of agencies of government, and I am the most critical of that kind of intransigence of the bureaucracies in the place. And I think there ought to be some way that they pay a price for that intransigence, this particular agency. But put it in the broader context, and this must be taken in a broader context in terms of the groundwater legislation that has passed and become law, and the amount of requirements that are being imposed, and the impacts that will occur to those who have domestic wells, and there's no question that they're going to be affected by this. I have been telling the municipalities, you better wake up, because your municipal wells are going to be looked at and dealt with too by what I call the water police. So I'm a little apprehensive about the overall direction that we're taking here. So I might be more sympathetic on this individual point. Where I see the train going down the track, Madam Chair, I'm going to be a little bit more resistant, I think. I look at groundwater as a private property right, and I do not believe there have been sufficient, or if any, incidences of great problems with wells that have been utilized in terms of gathering a resource from under our ground, be that water or oil or gas.
All right. We will now turn to Dogger.
Thank you very much for this opportunity to discuss with you what the request is and to respond a little bit to some of the comments of Senator Pavley. I think I actually share many or all of the concerns of Senator Pavley, and I've actually been to speak with Senator Pavley and with you, Chair Wolk, about a lot of these issues. I think that many of the issues that are being discussed are very, very long in the making, some of them 30 years in the making, and they can't be fixed overnight. The requests that it is probably a fact that the request is late, in part because I was met with a tumultuous array of crises when I walked in the door in June. And I've been ferreting out not only dealing with crisis, but also what did the division need to move forward. I share the concerns that you have. I deal with them every day. They fully occupy my time from 7 in the morning until I crawl in bed at night. There are serious problems, and we are trying to address them. I specifically asked for some resources to fix some of the key problems that the division has. For example, we do have a very substantial increased workload on aquifer exemptions and UIC-related work. And I've asked for positions to do that, as well as to bolster enforcement of our UIC regulations. I've asked for positions around data management. It's clear to me that the division has not had a culture of data quality and data control that it needs in order to be able to provide the data that are necessary to regulate in a modern environment. I've asked for positions to bolster our monitoring and compliance unit because it's very clear to me that we need increased vigilance internally to understand how effective we are. The Monitoring Compliance Unit has been very busy in consolidating a report on its view of the execution of the UIC program in District 1. And in fact, the reason that our 855 report is late is I wanted to include that as a very substantial piece of the 855 report that I think will indicate that the division is serious about rectifying the problems that Senator Pavley spoke about. I've asked for additional positions for our CEQA unit to bolster our our environmental review and compliance unit, which to bolster our adherence to environmental laws. So those are specifically targeted towards deficiencies which I have identified in my 11 months here. With respect to being late, I see things a little bit differently. I think if we look at what happened with the 1281 report, we've learned a lot that we didn't know when that started. The phrase that knowing where the water came from, where it went, and how it was disposed of belies an incredibly complex water management system in industry. We had to have industry change how they do their tracking of water. That actually required that the larger operators change their computer systems and how they track water. They couldn't report to the division in the ways that the division needed them to report. In addition, what we didn't know now that we know, didn't know then that we know now, is that this legislation will require the reporting of billions of data items to the division. And quite frankly, we grossly underestimated the magnitude of the data that would be required to satisfy the legislation. What we did do was we gave the operators 30 extra days to fulfill their reporting for the first quarter. That doesn't mean that the data are lost. That means that the data have been delayed 30 days. The data for the following 3 quarters will be done on time. With respect to other deadlines, I'd like to say that we're meeting our deadlines on our EPA compliance schedule. And I think, you know, though I wasn't here for much of it, I believe in looking at the record that we've met all of the SP4 milestones. So I think there is a new wind blowing. The resources requested target specific deficiencies that need remediation. And I think we're improving on you know, being timely with reports. Finally, I'd like to say that there's a request for a new data management system, not modifying what we have or bolting on another widget on what we have, but a data management system that addresses the modern needs of the regulatory environment in California. California has the most difficult and complex oil and gas operation in the country by far, possibly the world. I've been to the Saudi oil fields. California makes them look simple by comparison. We do not have any data management system that is capable to the task to be both transparent and responsive to stakeholders, including the industry and the environmental organizations, and to be effective regulators. The longer we delay on that, the longer we delay on laying the foundation for fundamental change within the division.